So, good evening everyone. In meditation instruction tonight, we were told Zen is looking into the question, what am I? So I want to read something. This is a poem that we give every new student in the first Zen interview. So those of you who've never had an interview at the Zen Center here, the first time you come in for your interview, you'll be handed this book and you'll read this poem. So I'm going to read it out loud. The human root, coming empty-handed, going empty-handed, that is human. When you're born, where do you come from? When you die, where do you go? Life is like a floating cloud which appears. Death is like a floating cloud which disappears. The floating cloud itself originally does not exist. Life and death, coming and going, are also like that. But there is one thing which always remains clear. It is pure and clear, not depending on life and death. Then what is the one pure and clear thing? In the last month, there have been a number of deaths that many of us have been touched with or touched by. I'm struck sitting in this room of 4 people who are hospice workers, and we've been touched, I think all of us are in the last month, by death, but death is happening all the time. Just ask one of our hospice workers. They're all employed every day. Somebody, somewhere right now is dying. More than one person. And at the very same moment, somewhere, right now, someone is being born. It's a constant cycle, constantly going on. This poem, The Human Root, says, when you were born, where do you come from? When you die, where do you go? None of us have any clue. All of us have some idea, but none of us know. So Marshall said in the meditation instruction, Zen is asking the question, what am I? One of these deaths that happened very recently was Stephen Levine. And Stephen had a book that many people were touched by. And the title asked the question, who dies? You can ask the same question, who is born? And as we heard in our meditation instructions tonight, who lives? Each one of us has to grapple with that question. Each one of us is stuck because there's no answer. We have a lot of ideas about things, but no answer. And if there's anything to come away from this talk with, the most important thing is that we don't know. The problem is we don't like that. We like to know. So we do all sorts of things, create all sorts of scenarios to tell us. If you like the Buddhist view, they'll tell you about reincarnation. So don't worry too much, because the who may change, but don't worry, you'll be born again. If you take the Christian view, there's another way of being born again. Or maybe you'll take the view that you go to heaven. Or if you're bad, you know where you go. But nobody knows. And that scares the hell out of us. So we're always trying to manufacture something. It's logical, it makes sense. But in the manufacturing, we create a prison. And everything that we experience gets filtered through that prison. So the stories that we tell ourselves actually end up feeding the fantasy and the myth that we create. But we don't know who we are. We don't know who's born. We don't know who dies. First line says, coming empty-handed, going empty-handed. You come in with nothing, go out with nothing. And in between, we try to accumulate as much as we can. And then we have to protect what we have. There's a song by Laurie Anderson that I like a lot. And the chorus goes something like, we don't know where we come from. We don't know who we are. When you see a man who has fallen, pick him up and carry him. When you see a woman who's fallen, pick her up into your arms, because we don't know where we come from, and we don't know who we are. The irony is that if we could accept that, that's the first step to our freedom. I can hear the voice of Zen Master Bon Soeng in my ear saying, don't know is your true self. We are don't know. All of our efforts to know cut off the reality of what we don't know. I was trying to count, I didn't get too far, but since I have been a teacher in the Quantum School of Zen, there's either 5, 6, or 7 teachers who have died. Many of them, the last one, just about a month ago, Daejin, was in his late 50s. All of us have this fantasy, well, yeah, I guess we're going to die, but it's when we're old and decrepit, and we're going to want to die then. But you don't know. You don't know. Daejin, a Zen master from the United States, died when he was 57 years old. So obviously being a Zen master doesn't help. You're still going to die. The head abbot of the San Francisco Zen Center a couple of years ago, Steve Stuckey, died. He was 65. Zen Master Wu Bang in our school was also in his mid-60s. The Zen Master in Portland, Kilgan, died. He was 66, 67. So even attaining this don't know doesn't help, if your goal is to be alive. I've talked about this before, but when I was back in college, I started reading the teachings of Don Juan by Carlos Castaneda. And in the third book called Journey to Ixtlan, he stripped away a lot of the shamanistic practices that were in the first 2 books. And the third book is basically, how I see it, is a handbook for living. And one of the chapters is entitled Death as an Advisor. So on one hand, death is sad, depressing, scary. But in this teaching, he was saying death is also awakening. Death can enliven us. So he said, use death as your advisor. In his image, death was hovering just over your left shoulder. So I'm giving death a little massage right now. It's always there. And you don't know when the hammer's going to come down. So his advice to use death as an advisor meant to live. You know you're going to die. Zen Master Bon Soeng said, you're already dead. It's not a question of if, it's only a matter of when. So if that's so, how can you live? What interests me about Zen, actually my area of interest is in the intersection of Zen and everyday life. What am I doing right now? If we can bring this don't know mind into our everyday life, we can start to get a little freedom from the prison of the stories and ideas that we create. If we can get some ease with not knowing, then we don't have to create false scenarios to give us some certainty and, I would say, false certainty and false stability. What Zen practice through this investigation of what am I is bringing us to is some real flexibility, stability, openness, wisdom, and compassion. That derives from not knowing. Because not knowing helps us burst the bubble of our fantasies, our stories. If you really look into the present moment and really investigate, you can't help but see that what you believe about it is wrong. Life is not what we think. You can take that a lot of different ways. We mostly live our lives in the fantasy of our minds and our emotions. Really all one thing. What Zen teaches at its essence is if we can let go of the story and not be attached so much to what we think we know, we actually have the possibility of connecting with what is. And if we're not so attached to our own story and our own false sense of self, then we're more open to what's around us. There's so many different ways of talking about it, but the fundamental recognition is that the separation that I believe in between myself and everyone and everything else is an arbitrary story that's actually not true. I'm not asking you to take my word for this. I am giving you my sense of it. But what I'm asking you to do is to investigate your own experience. Use the word, and I think I might be borrowing this from Byron Katie. Really? Is that really true? If you can connect with and listen to the stories that you're telling and start to challenge those stories, not in a judgmental and a critical way. It's not your fault. This is what everybody does. But that doesn't mean you have to do it that way. So if you can challenge those stories, those assumptions, those beliefs and ideas with a simple, really? Is that true? I think she asks it twice, because once usually is not enough. Actually, it's an infinite amount of reallys. What am I? Don't know. That question really is an expression of not knowing. And once we open ourselves to not knowing, our lives are changed. Life is different. in the context of our everyday human life, most of us, I would say all of us, but probably somebody here is going to tell me it's not you, it's not me. So most of us, though, are stuck in an endless cycle of reactivity. There's the event or the experience that happens, and then there's my reaction to it. Buddha said it very simply. We either like, we dislike, or we're neutral. And I don't know about you, but the neutral part is pretty infrequent. Even if I think I'm neutral, still I have to ask the question, really? Is that really true? And generally I find there's some charge somewhere. And we spend our lives reacting to what we think is going on, forgetting that we don't really know what's going on. We only have our own personal perspective. Ask the person you're close to. They just went through the same experience. What did they experience? And if you really are honest, you find out it's not what you experienced. I think it's the state of New Jersey that does not admit eyewitness testimony in a court. Because eyewitness testimony is unreliable. I've told this story before, but there's a TV show on that I see on Netflix, I haven't seen it in a while, but it's called Brain Games. And they set up the scenario. They had about 30 or 40 people in Central Park in New York. And they had one guy doing, what is it called, 3-card Monte? They were doing this game, and everybody was watching the game. And in the middle of the game, there's a crime. Somebody steals, maybe it's a woman's purse, I don't remember exactly what it was, and runs off. And then they ask people, who knows what happened? And all these people tell you what happened. And the first thing you notice is everybody's telling you a different story, down to what were they wearing? What was their ethnicity? How did it happen? No one story. Everybody's got a different story. But we're so sure about what we saw. But time and again it's proven, just because we believe with certainty that we saw something doesn't mean that that's what we saw. And it's very hard to convince us that it's not true, because it feels so true. Time and again, though, it's not true. It's just the way it is. It's good to know this, though. It's not like anybody's doing anything wrong. It's just the human condition. And there's a simple way to start piercing the human condition. And that's keeping what we call a don't-know mind. A don't-know mind is a mind that's curious rather than certain. It's open rather than closed. To me, it's a state of wonder. What is it? And again, this isn't a heavy, something's wrong kind of mind. It's enlivening. Because if we keep this open, what is it? Really mind, then we're curious. We're looking. We're actually paying attention. And we're piercing the prison of our idea and actually getting closer to what's happening. And everybody who teaches Zen will tell you something different about what Zen is. But for me, that's the point. To keep this don't-know mind and connect with the world that actually is happening right now. To be able to somehow get out of the prison of my own ideas, even if it's a good idea, it's still a prison. Because in the relative world of name and form, everything is always changing. So even if it's good now, If you hold on to it, in the next moment, it's not going to apply. And it's going to turn to bad. Good and bad are just relative terms. If it works in this moment, I say it's good. When it doesn't work in the next moment, I say it's bad. And that's the point. We're always reacting to what's good and bad, what we like and we don't like. The third patriarch said, the great way is not difficult for those who don't make distinctions. That's why it's so hard for all the rest of us. Because we're constantly making decisions. Zen Master Bon Soeng had a way through this dilemma. He didn't tell us, don't make distinctions. He said, don't attach to those distinctions. Do you hear the difference? It's very important. Our human minds and hearts are the way they are. Each one of us is conditioned in our own particular way, and we're playing out that conditioning. We're just stuck playing out our conditioning. And unless we find this don't know mind, we're stuck in the prison of our conditioning, and we will play it out, and then we will die. Some of us will have a good life, in quotes. Some of us will have a bad life, in quotes. But all of us will just play out our conditioning and die. There's another way. It's to challenge the conditioning. And if you pay attention to your own reactivity and bring a not knowing mind to that, it changes things. Again, don't take this as some theory. Apply it in your own life. See what happens. This isn't about theory. It's about bringing not knowing to the moment of your life. When something happens and boom, you're angry. Wonder about that. What happened? Where did this anger come from? How come I'm angry and she's not? Is it really that I'm right and she's wrong? I don't know. If we can bring this not knowing to the moment, there's a chance to open. So one more thing before I end, to ground it in the simplicity of our breath and our practice. These are all good words. To do it, I talked about some kind of stability. Finding a way to not attach to our likes and dislikes. And again, if you go back to the meditation instruction we had tonight, slowly breathing into our lower abdomen. Slowly breathing out. It almost doesn't matter in meditation what else you do. Slowly breathe in. Slowly breathe out into your lower abdomen. So on your inhalation, you allow your belly to rise. And on your exhalation, you allow it to fall. And if you couple that with not knowing, with don't know mind, you will build the stability, and maybe I could use the word confidence, to be able to not know, to be able to meet the situation in the midst of my own reactivity, and to wonder, what is that? Is that really so? Who is it that's reacting? As you investigate, you find very clearly that you're not who you think you are. But even us experienced Zen students forget that and live our lives perpetuating this fantasy that I am fill in the blank. Better go in your life with I am not fill in the blank. And if I am not, then what am I? Breaks open the fantasy, opens the door of the prison. Then when the rain is falling, you can feel that your face is getting wet. And if I could go one moment back to those lyrics from Laurie Anderson, there's one more very important point that I'm not going to have enough time to really talk about. But when you see someone who's falling, pick them up, help them, carry them. Remember, I said there's a false separation between I and you. You and I are part of the same thing. For me, all I have to do is remember the pictures of the galaxies that the Hubble spacecraft takes. We take these pictures from how many billions of light years away, and you see this organism. But if you get up close, you'll probably find that there's trillions of little organisms that are part of that organism. We have more bacteria in our bodies than human cells. So are we just hosts for bacteria? What are we? What is a human being? And we're constantly exchanging electrons with the world around us. This false sense of separation keeps us isolated and alone. So bring that not knowing, even to that. And if you find in the moment that you're in a way to help, it changes everything. I'll close with a simple quote from Zen Master Bon Soeng. If it's for me, suffering appears. For all beings, no suffering. So even when you're doing the quote-unquote good works of your life, if there's suffering for you attached to it, you're probably stuck in your own self. I've just been having this experience. I've done a favor for someone, and that's a wonderful thing. But then I noticed I was kind of pissed off because I wasn't getting enough gratitude. And then I realized, well, that tells me something. Who's it for? And what does it say about me? And again, this is not a judgment or a criticism, but there's information there. What do I learn about the person I call Jeff when I find myself stuck in not feeling like the other person's grateful enough? Is that about them or is it about me? My hunch is both. Because she and I are connected in what we're doing. I play off of her, she plays off of me. I have my ideas about her, she has my ideas about me. Who knows? Everything we do is an opportunity to practice. Everything we do reveals the truth if we pay attention. And everything we do reveals for us the ways we get in our own way. I think all I'm trying to do in this talk tonight is encourage us all to use the moment that we have. Don't waste it. It's not coming back. This is it.